Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slava Heroyam podcast, a podcast that is exclusively about fighting propaganda against Ukraine and to spread awareness of the truth of places of the Russian terror campaigns in places like Kherson, and the truth of how this war can be won with victory and bring peace very quickly. This show happens every 7 p.m. on Thursday. So far, live audiences haven't joined me very well, so I need to start advertising that a bit more. That is the chosen time. If I can find a time that works better for my audience, I will do so. But again, these are recorded, and you can find us. Please subscribe on Substack, on YouTube, on the author Travis Hightower, on Facebook, the Slava Heroyam podcast on YouTube. You can find it as called Glory to the Heroes on Spotify. It didn't like preferred the English translation on Spotify for some reason. And you can always find us on StreamYard if you have that as well. Today, as always, we'll talk about any previous attacks on civilians from the previous week. We don't have any names this week. In the town of Yarova, Ukraine, which is in the Donetsk region. Now, Donetsk has always been a highly contested region ever since the anti-terror operations began in 2014-2015. So in Donetsk, during the anti-terror operation period, you had folks that wanted to be separatists, spurred on by Russian propaganda and the belief that they would get their own nation because an illegal coup had happened on the Day of Dignity. Something very important to understand is that these anti-terror operations were either spurred on by Russian operatives or by Ukrainians that were turned, unfortunately, against their own. But they believed, as we're seeing now in our country, in certain stories of division. And they believed that their government was not a legitimate one. And so they basically planned to secede. Not secede and then join Russia, although Russia was making offers. We'll talk more about the whole history of that. But the reason that I wanted to mention a little bit of that history now is because Yarova is in that region where Putin should be trying to win over those people, get them to his side. Because if you're going to have negotiations to get that portion of the land, he's going to want the people to be on his side, right? To be able to say, yeah, okay, we'll concede to being part of Russia in the name of peace. Well, somehow I don't think when you kill 24 people waiting in line for their pension in part of the land that they're trying to negotiate for, 24 people died. Let me show you. This is, all they could do for these folks that were hit by a missile waiting in line to retire. So, it's a planned event that, unfortunately, all it takes is an informant to let Russian forces know, and you have a nice gathering of people target within range. But that doesn't seem like a guy that cares, or an action of people that care too much about the land that they're supposedly negotiating for. You'd think if you're running your terror campaign, you'd want to do it against further west and the places that you're not negotiating for at all. So we also lost 4 more people in Kyiv. A mother and newborn baby were part of the casualties, with 40 injured. That was on the same night that Poland experienced an incursion of 19 Shahid drones. We talked a little bit about that yesterday, and that is going to be our main topic for today. But first, let's get to our heroic organization, or Ukraine support organization of the week. So let's talk about Ed's Friends. Now, Ed's Friends, let me put the URL up. Okay, edsfriends.org. It's real easy to find. Ed's Friends is a donation organization for humanitarian aid, but specifically for surgeons and doctors. Now, a lot of them is to bring medical equipment to Ukrainian doctors, but there are also as many foreign doctors as Ed can get into the country as you can. It takes a long time to do that, for a lot of different reasons, to include that, there are certain countries that want to infiltrate these organizations, but we want to keep them honest, and this is another honest organization. So the founder is Ed Ma, and he founded the organization along with Ukrainian friends to first bring aid, and then to bring as many surgeons as possible to Ukraine, especially for people needing reconstructive surgery and other life-saving surgeries as well, from some of these horrific terror campaign attacks. So I highly recommend you check out edsfriends.org. And, as I always say, when you're looking at your donations for the year, a lot of you folks out there will donate to Wounded Warriors and to veterans organizations, as you should be doing. Allocate $5, $10 from those Ukrainian or from those American veteran organizations, which I'm sure the majority of your donations will go to, as they should. Take $5 or $10 and send it to one of these Ukrainian organizations I'm recommending. Because remember, there are American servicemen and veterans and people serving over there all over the world. And on September 11th in particular, I think we should be reminded that, we cannot disconnect and unplug from this world. Because when we do, when we start to feel safe in our high castle, we'll have another wake-up call. And Ukraine is just the beginning of that. They've been holding the wall, so to speak, of in Game of Thrones terms. They're the ones on the wall. But if that wall falls, you'll have the ice zombie horde coming for us all. So. And one way that you can kind of tell that is by what happened in Poland. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I talked about it yesterday, and I thought that the majority of the aircraft had been shot down. I misspoke. Only 4 of the 19 were shot down. The rest were assessed to be not a threat, headed somewhere non-threatening. But like I did point out, most of these drones were probably of the decoy nature, because if they sent any that had the explosives built in and it hit, say, that house, there was one house that was hit. I think I have a picture of that one. Do I have a picture of that up right now? No, I don't. You'd lose more than one house. So I'm sure for this probing test to see how NATO would respond, they sent decoy drones or unarmed drones just to see how far they would get and what the response would be. And I think Russia was probably pretty happy with the response if they only got 4 of them. What you want to do when you know you're being tested is shoot down as many as possible. Maybe you don't want to feel like you're wasting munitions or something like that, but I would recommend Poland that you go for a show of strength and efficiency and go ahead and knock down as many of you as you can, especially if you're not going to set up a no-fly zone. Europe has gotten a lot of criticism for the lack of response. They did activate Article 4, which means that you have one incursion on one country, they'll all act to defend. And so they have now everyone on high alert. That's good. You've got F-35s on patrol. That's good. I don't know if you have tankers in the area or AWACS or anything like that. But I have open here. Let's take a look at one aspect of the logistics of what it would take to operate a no-fly zone. And I think what really needs to happen is a Western no-fly zone at first. Protect Lviv, which is, mostly ethnically Ukrainian, but also in Polish. So protect the Western Ukraine. And here's the problem that they have setting up a no-fly zone now. that Ukraine has Patriots and F-16s and all this kind of stuff before we would have set it up in the first place. Now you have the logistics of deconfliction to worry about, and deconfliction means assigning different airspaces to different countries, so that you don't have Ukrainian defenses shooting into where you've got NATO people patrolling. So if you're gonna set up a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine, you've pretty much Ukraine needs to cede the defense of Western Ukraine to NATO forces, which could be good because they could concentrate completely on the east. But will they feel comfortable with that right away? I don't know. That needs to be negotiated. But if you start those negotiations, you're already showing strength. The real strength will come when you start talking about this sort of thing and Putin rattles the nuclear saber. And at that point, you say, we don't care. We're doing this. That's how you actually start looking strong. Because you don't even have to follow through with it. You just need to show that you're not backing down to Putin's threats or Russia's nonsense, and showing the world that you do not trust their word. So deconfliction will be really important. And I'm showing we have the new multi-role tanker. Boeing has that new tanker, and NATO has gotten a bunch of them. Here's kind of a timeline of the countries that have tankers and how involved they are. So you've got the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, Poland, no, not Poland, Romania, Germany. Need to learn my flags. So let's see if it tells me. Okay, well, in this timeline, you have some of them. Germany and Norway, Belgium. Belgium must have been one of those flags. All right, and it was started by the Netherlands. Those Dutch. All right, so we've been building up our tanker force. We have a nice tanker force ready to go. This fact sheet, which is on NATO.int, kind of gives you an idea of the tanker force that would be running 24/7 to keep jets flying 24/7 to really run a no-fly zone, much like we did in Operation Northern Watch and Southern Watch. I'll have some people that participated in that operation. It was from 1997 to 2003. Those are going to be the guests I'm aiming for. So I already have one thinking about it. So look forward to that next week, because I really want to start driving home what a no-fly zone looks like, because that a Western no-fly zone followed by a full no-fly zone would not only show strength, but be the correct trajectory to actually turning this from a war of attrition into a war of mobility for Ukraine, which leads to victory. And I'll have to provide some examples and historical examples of how that happens as well. Because a lot of people are looking at this and saying, what good does a no-fly zone do when you have all these smaller drones flying around taking care of things? Well, the key to that, to a no-fly zone taking care of mobility, and you're worried about the smaller explosive drones that the armies are using, is to provide anti-drone warfare. So a no-fly zone this time would not look like Northern Watch and Southern Watch, and it would involve a lot of interceptor drones, some technologies that Ukraine has already been coming up with, and some Western companies have been coming up with. So a no-fly zone would take things from a technological garage sale for Europe and the United States to activating the war machines of these nations. Now, politically, the problem with that is it's on fragile ground because of a big populist movement that deservedly wants to spend more to build middle class citizens in a time when all of the Western nations have a deteriorating middle class. And that's not really the subject of this podcast, but to understand that is in the background, and that's who needs to be convinced, is that new military equipment leads to money for the countries. but that people have the power themselves to make the middle class better. And neither of those two things need to be mutually exclusive. They can operate very separately. In fact, the U.S. government is designed so that military funding and government services to people are separate entities. And I've talked a little bit about how that budget works before, but we want to build a picture of what a budget for a no-fly zone would look like, who would bear the brunt of that budget, and let it be European-led with assets from the United States that European countries don't have, like extra AWACS, F-22s, those kind of things that will get the machine rolling. And keep in mind that the end objective is to have a no-fly zone for a few months to at first show strength, and then perhaps a few more months later expand it to a strategic objective moving towards victory. And that's what this channel is going to be about, is convincing people that that is feasible. Because what you've got to understand is the negotiations taking place now are a show, or that took place in Alaska are a show. And instead, what you have is civilians being killed and Poland being tested, and the Baltic states are next. That's why they had to activate Article 4. All right. So we talked about tankers. We talked about we have not talked about the capabilities of the F-35, which has a capability to shoot down a lot of these larger drones safer and detect and shoot from further away than most of the other aircraft. And in fact, I would venture to say that probably the detections and kills of the 4 of them that actually got killed were from the Dutch F-35's higher probability rate of shooting those down with that particular aircraft. So the look down, shoot down capability is what you want against drones. They're a cold object, so you need an advanced Sidewinder. Not any heat-seeking missile will do. And you have a lot of these interceptor drones that will probably be able to supplement that, but you have to deconflict those and run them at the border. So the other thing that can be of a concern is Russian SAMWEZs out of Belarus. In Operation Northern Watch, some of the only engagements where Saddam Hussein tested was to try to fire some SAMs at U.S. forces, and those SAMs were immediately destroyed by HARM missiles. I think that was when they tested, it was in 1998. Yeah, 1998. They took some shots, and they learned that real quick that was a bad deal. Northern Watch was to prevent to help protect the Kurds, and what provided was before that you had a no-fly zone called Operation Provide Comfort. So we were protecting these tribal folks on the border for a long time, for much less terror than Russia is invoking. And it all comes down to the final point of not being afraid of nuclear blackmail. All right, there was one more thing. We want to talk a little bit about the hero of the week. It's a new thing that I've added to this program. It will be a recap of an article that I will write each week on a different Ukrainian hero, not always a warrior. Sometimes it will be medics or people that have He's done amazing things to help people relocate, get prisoners back, facilitate prisoner exchanges, this sort of thing. All right, Robert Magyar Pravdi. So he was a politician, but he was also a businessman, entrepreneur. This is what he looked like in 2011 when he ran a big agricultural company. So in Ukraine at that time, before the Euromaidan Revolution, they were still kind of headed towards an authoritarian government, and the people sensed it. Now they had capitalism going, but in this case they had a company that this guy ended up in charge of. He didn't start the company or anything like that, he just ended up in charge of it. Although I get the sense that he did start some of his own agricultural companies on his own. He is Hungarian ethnicity, Robert is, and so born kind of on the Ukrainian and Hungarian border, and went to college, graduated with a business degree, just like so many Americans, and ended up in charge of this major company, trying to defend that it wasn't going to, screw the people over, basically. But even in an interview that I read from him, they were like, eventually they were wanting to go towards a fully state-owned company. Now, the United States has a few state-owned companies. I think Amtrak is one of them. So it's not unprecedented. European countries do it more often than we do. And that's one of the things that's unique about us, in fact, is we don't have very many state-owned companies. But for a large portion of agriculture, which is Ukraine's primary export, to be state-owned, raised some eyebrows, because they were 50-50, and there was a lot of secrecy about who the other 50% was. And they thought, I think, that if they made it completely state-owned, that they wouldn't be worried that one of the stakeholders was Vladimir Putin, which was there was evidence for. So this guy leaves that company in 2012, just resigns. Was not able to figure out why. But he went home, and in 2019, his parents were attacked by grenade attacks in the far west of Ukraine. That's not where the terror operations were supposed to be happening. So why was his parents attacked by grenades? They never caught the suspect, but both of them were managed to escape without being killed. I know the father may have been hurt, the mom was unharmed. You take a look at this guy from where he was in 2016, obviously still doing well for himself, has some businesses. And then after the full-scale invasion, you can see a difference in his face. Not just that he grew a beard, that he's haunted. And he didn't want to just sit in the trenches and fight that kind of war. So he used his assets and donations to build Ukraine's first drone force and drone brigade, where it eventually became the brigade that would train all the other brigades in counter-drone use, drone-on-drone warfare, how to find enemy drone operators, destroy them. And he got the call sign Magyar, which means Hungarian. And so recently, he got Hero of Ukraine, which is also called Order of the Gold Star. And now the 414th Battalion is still operating. There's a pretty good chance this guy is one of the orchestrators of Operation Spiderweb. And he also is responsible for decimating the oil pipelines into Russia and India. And so those attacks from Magyar's birds, as they're called, caused him to be banned from going back to Hungary, which I don't think he's too concerned about. But the tariffs, the only threat against him is that Europe was following Trump's lead and doing tariffs against Russia, but also India and China, after these oil strikes happened, which then probably provoked the testing of Poland's defenses. So it all comes full circle there. We have Hero of the Week. Don't forget about Ed's friends. And we will see you next week. We'll hopefully be talking to one or two of my associates that I served with that served in Northern Watch and Southern Watch. So we'll get a better idea from people that actually served in those campaigns. I'm also talking to and hoping to get an interview from soldiers and Marines that are serving near Kherson. There may be some security concerns there and language concerns. So we'll see if that happens in the future, but that's where we're aiming at. And then we will talk to some of the folks that we've talked to again. But stick around, as I said, subscribe, come back every Thursday. If you don't catch the show on Thursday, you'll see everything up in the recorded versions by Friday afternoon. Thank you, and glory to those who defend the Constitution of the United States, and Slava Ukraini.